Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and very warm welcome to our Cumbria Tourism webinar on becoming a motorhome or campervan certified site location. It's great to have you on board today. We've got about 35 people registered, so we hope that you'll find this afternoon's session really helpful. The aim of the session is to give you the information you need to make a decision and make that decision about whether you can go ahead with a certified site location, what that requires, what it means for you to do, and how to get there. And we've got two really good speakers, particularly this afternoon, to help us with that. We've got Gemma Proctor, who's Cumbria Tourism's own officer dealing specially with this project. We've also got David Denham, our guest speaker from the Motor Caravanners Club. If you've not met me before, my name is Jim Walker. I'm chair of Cumbria Tourism, and it's my pleasure to just oversee things this afternoon. We've also got Jill Haig, our own managing director, here too. She's very interested in this project as well, so we'll be hearing from her too as we go on. So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to hear in a minute from Gemma about the work that she's been doing and what the background to our project and what's going on there. And then we're going to hear from David, who's going to tell us the details about certified site locations and what is required from his deep and extensive experience, which will be really, really useful. And then after that, we're going to then go into a Q&A session, and we're going to go from there and answer any specific questions that you've got. So it's really important that by the end of the day, you know as much as you want to know that we can give you to make your decision how to go forward. So just about housekeeping, first of all, then. So we are going to record this session. If you're unhappy with that in any way, please let us know. But we've been using these sessions and recording them for different webinars, and they've been really useful in helping spread the message going forward. And also the Q&A session, the best way into that is to use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. Just pop your questions into there, and we'll get to deal with hopefully every one of those that pops up as we go along. So just to talk a bit about Cumbria Tourism then, if you're not a Cumbria Tourism member, you may already know that we're a 2,500 strong business organisation for the whole county of Cumbria, working right across every district in the county. We're one of the strongest destination management organisations in the country, and we're very proud of that. But we are 97% funded by our members' income that comes to us via them, either through membership fees or through spending money with us on joint marketing or supporting our press and PR work, various partnership working together. So it's quite an unusual way to work. It's successful for Cumbria, that's where we are. But today particularly, I'd like to reference the support that Sellafield has given us to work on this area of initiative, looking at campervans and looking at the whole issue. So thanks Sellafield for that support. So Cumbria Tourism has been very active. If you remember, hopefully you've seen that. We've been very active, especially during coronavirus pandemic, helping our members navigate through some pretty difficult and stormy waters. We know there's still a long way to go, but we believe that it's fundamentally important to support members and help them in every way we can. We've been lobbying hard with government. We've been trying to interpret for members government guidance and government legislation. And if you've been a member, hopefully you've had a benefit from that and seen it. We're always keen to hear your views. We're always keen to listen to what you've got to say. And if you're not a member, we really seriously hope that you will consider supporting us and helping us on this journey. Even in the coronavirus pandemic, we've had a lot of new members join us, which has been really heartwarming. So if you're a new member, thanks very much for that. And if you're not a member, please do think about that, because we can only do the work we do with support from operators like yourselves. You've got our email address, drop us an email, and we'll happily talk to you more about membership going forward. So finally, from me, just a little bit of background in terms of why we're doing this today. So the coronavirus pandemic's been difficult for everybody, that's a given, we know that. But we also know that our destination, particularly the national park areas in Cumbria, had a difficult time last year. Unfortunately, the press have picked up on this, and if you believe what they tell us, there's just a lot of problems in there. But actually, there's some opportunities too, and there's some optimism for going forward, and that's what today's about. We know from our research, and we know from the latest news, which is ever changing, isn't it, that this year will be another different year, and we know that the staycation will be very strong indeed. We also know that a lot of people have bought motorhomes recently and used any resources they've got to book, to think about holidays going forward and to use their savings to buy into the holiday market in the motorhome area. So we know there's going to be strong demand again this year. I think it's also at this point just to reference the really good work that's been done by a partnership across Cumbria, looking at some of the issues that cropped up last year and how those could be minimised and dealt with in 2021. And that partnership has been a really strong team between the National Park Authority, the Lake District National Park. It's been a partnership too with the LEP and with Cumbria Tourism working really hard, and others like the National Trust feeding into it. And part of this work comes directly from that initiative and a desire to get ahead of the problem and think hard about how we can accommodate more motorhomes going forward, and how we can use the benefit of those motorhomes coming to the county to really power up the economy and power up the recovery and spread the benefits to other areas of the county, not just the national parks. And that's something that the National Park Authority, I think we've probably got Kerry on the call today, has been very keen to share with us too, and encourage people to visit areas outside the national park. I think, to be clear, if we didn't do anything, we would be criticised as a destination for not thinking ahead. And that's what we're doing here. It's quite a delicate situation because many of our members are caravan park operators and owners, and we're not seeking to undermine their work in any way, shape or form. We're simply working to build capacity to help us through this particular time period and ensure our customers that do come to Cumbria have a really good holiday and go back and tell people how wonderful it was going forward. So that's just a quick summary of where we are really. I'm sure you recognise a lot of those elements that we just talked through just now, and I'm now going to hand over to Gemma to give us some more details. Thanks, Gemma.
Thanks, Jim. So just to set a bit of context, at the end of last summer, Cumbria Tourism conducted a visitor survey with quite a strong response. 9% of the people who responded cited that they came to the area in a campervan or a motorhome, which is actually quite high and higher than it has been previously. 54% of those people used official sites, and 46% used either a mix of casual and official sites and or just casual sites. And the majority of those people, when asked, showed a very strong intention to come again in 2021. Most people citing from Easter onwards, which is lucky, seeing as though they may possibly be able to do so if all things go to plan. So that means that potentially this summer we are going to be faced with a lot of new visitors who came to the area last year, returning again this summer for the first time. But that is then also teamed with a lot of our traditional visitors who tend to be sort of 40 plus couples who are also now, who've potentially been shielding for up to 12 months and have now received at least the first dose of their vaccine and are definitely looking to return this summer, whereas last summer they might not have visited. So from that point of view, we do have the potential to have an awful large number of motorhomes and campervans looking to come to the area this summer. Well, starting from as soon as we open, really. This caused some issues last summer. A lot of the informal parking areas were filling up quickly, and we did have some issues with therefore people parking in places that weren't ideal and restricting access for emergency vehicles and work vehicles and agricultural vehicles, which had caused problems. Due to this, there is going to be more restrictions in some areas going forward. Some of the places where people traditionally may have come and been able to stay for the night, they might not be able to anymore. And there will be more enforcement in some of the places where sort of local bylaws and things like that weren't being abided by. So we do potentially have less capacity in those informal parking areas, which again could cause knock-on problems if we don't provide some alternatives for people. So Cumbria Tourism were tasked by the Tactical Visitor Management Group alongside the local authorities and other organisations to look at the situation in terms of motorhomes and campervans and just see a way forward and what we could potentially do to help manage those visitors who were intending on coming. So the piece of work isn't about trying to increase visitors to the area this summer. It's simply about trying to accommodate those people who would have come last year but didn't have the opportunity to come, and the new visitors who came last year who are intending to return. We are looking to introduce potentially, so we do have, as Jim said, quite a wealth of very high-end, high-quality campsites in the county. The market that we're looking at for motorhomes and campervans, as the statistics showed, not all of them do want to use these sites and these facilities. Some of them prefer to be on smaller, quieter sites, and because they're self-contained units, they don't necessarily want all the facilities that those sites offer. So the place where there does seem to be a gap in the market does seem to be for these more informal sites with more minimalistic facilities for people. And there is a piece of legislation which is under Natural England, which is a certified site, the site certification process. So sites can become certified to host up to 5 motorhomes or camper vans. And again, this depends on the amount of land they've got available. And there are double checks with this with the local planning authorities to make sure that there is nothing about the site that would make it particularly difficult for people to access or cause any particular problems. But it does mean that people don't have to go through the full formal planning process and the full processes that are involved in setting up an official campsite. These are more sort of, they're more flexible campsites. I don't really want to use the word pop-up campsites because I think that's been in the media a lot very negatively recently. But they're more, they're not really intended for sort of larger sites. They're not intended for ongoing use. If you are seriously considering looking at doing this as a, a very strong business venture and you've got a lot of land and you want more than 5 units, you really do need to look at the planning process. And again, the local planning officers are all very willing to have pre-plan discussions regarding this. But for smaller, more informal places who do have a little bit of hard standing, a little bit of level grass, who would like to accommodate up to 5 vehicles, then this legislation does allow for that without having to go through the full process. Sorry, excuse me. So as part of a wider strategy, Cumbria Tourism are looking at trying to encourage some more of these sites across the county. The wider strategy will try and aid and support this by providing other materials to help people look for these sites and to also help people have just generally improve the quality of their stay. So all the information that new motorhome providers might need, new motorhome users might need, in order to make sure they dispose of their waste in a responsible manner, to make sure they know what's expected of them, to encourage people to support our local communities and spend within our local communities, because our local communities will look forward to welcoming them back and that interaction with the visitors. It is also an opportunity for local businesses, so sort of smaller pubs, sports and social clubs, and potentially also local cricket clubs or grounds like that, who might have the capacity to actually generate a little bit of an additional income, which might hopefully get them through these difficult times when they're not able to operate. So hopefully there is a knock-on benefit there for local residents in trying to keep some of these other alternative local facilities open as well. So the wider strategy includes a code of conduct, which outlines just basic behaviour that we'd like to encourage people. I mean, a lot of these people are already visiting, have visited us before. They are responsible users, they are responsible campers. They know what they're doing. There are a lot of code of conducts already out there for motorhome owners and sign-ups to various organisations like Campervan. So our code of conduct just builds on that really, and hopefully will also get pushed out to people who haven't necessarily been motorhoming and campervanning for that long and aren't aware of the protocols and the conduct that's expected of them. So it talks a lot about just respecting local communities, not parking. It educates people as well, so not to park in passing places, not to travel in convoy, and that will be teamed with information which will include a downloadable map for people, which will show the routes around the county which are better for larger vehicles and which ones really should only be used for access to specific sites or specific locations if required, just to help people pre-plan routes so they know they're not going to go somewhere where potentially they could get stuck, and there's various difficulties on certain routes in terms of getting past each other. On top of that, we're also looking at producing information on local waste recycling sites, waste disposal sites, where motorhomes and campervans can park, and also safely during the day, and also looking at pushing out information about which areas of the county are busier, so working in collaboration with the Safe Lakes initiative, so that people know when they are planning on coming, they can look at which areas of the county are very busy and they can judge and base their decisions on where they're going to go and where they're going to travel on that information. We're also going to provide some inspirational information as well in terms of itineraries to try and encourage people to travel a little bit further afield and explore places they wouldn't necessarily always explore. So it may be that the first-time visitor who came last year is planning to go to some of the key visitor hotspots in the sort of Central Lakes or Keswick, which was very busy last year, but we're going to encourage them to try and go that little bit further and off the beaten track and go and explore maybe the Western Lakes and the coast, and other areas, just to try and spread people out a bit more as well. So just to give a bit of background as well in terms of the market in the UK for motorhomes and campervans. According to the DVLA, there are over 357,000 registered motor caravans in the UK. I think something like 60,000 of those are currently sold, but that's still an awful lot of motorhomes and campervans. 82% of people in a recent Campra survey, so Campra is the Campaign for Real Heirs. I do believe we've got somebody today in attendance from that organisation. So they represent, I think, over 16,000 motorhome and campervan owners. And their recent survey cites that 82% tend to tow all year round. So there is that possibility of year-round business from this market. And 91% are aged 40 or over. And again, this is quite significant in terms of the number of people who might want to visit us again this year, because motorhomes with onboard facilities and campervans with fully serviced onboard facilities, they tend to be a self-contained unit. So at the moment, in COVID restrictions and COVID times, they're deemed as being a fairly safe option for people. So there is a high number of people in the 40 plus age category who would have traditionally come to visit us last year who didn't feel like they could do, who have now received a vaccine, which means that we might get a lot of people who would normally spend their summer touring the continent who are not able to do so, who will be looking to staycate and tour at home instead. So again, all of this has kind of led to a wider strategy of looking at how we can put information out there for motorhome users to enable them to have much more safe and responsible stays. But as part of that strategy, if we are looking at moving people on and managing areas a lot better for people who are parking irresponsibly or don't know where to go, we then also need that capacity to be able to move people on to more appropriate locations. And this is where the site certification process comes in. So David is from the Motor Caravanners Club and will be able to give you a bit more background and information on the specifics. But essentially, you are allowed to have up to 5 motorhomes or campervans in a set plot. It's dependent on space requirements. So each motorhome or campervan, I think the normally site has been about 3.5 metres wide, and you have to have a 2 metre barrier or space in between each motorhome or campervan. Because this is for sort of fire reasons, essentially. So that obviously will limit the number of vehicles that you can actually accommodate on your site. Other requirements are obvious ones in terms of accessibility. So can larger vehicles access you from a main road, whether you're close to local other local residents and things like that. So there are quite a few different requirements, and again, there are different organisations that offer site certification, and a lot of them will go through the requirements with you as part of the process. We're looking at site certification specifically for motorhome and campervans, but there is also schemes for tents. And I think if you want to have awnings that are outside of the campervan and things like that, you do also have to have certification for tents alongside certification for motorhomes and campervans. So there's various crossovers. And again, some of you might be aware of the legislation, because it's a legislation that is quite widely used up by the Camping and Caravanning Club in terms of a lot of their certified sites as well. So there's a few different variations in it. You can go through the Caravan and Camping Club to become certified. You can go through the Motor Caravanners Club to become certified. And there's a few other organisations out there as well. But each one, dependent on who you become certified through, does dictate somewhat as to who you can accommodate on your site. So Caravan and Camping Club, you are supposed to be a member to be able to use their sites. Whereas the Motor Caravanners Club scheme is open to their members, but also non-members and other affiliate organisations as well. So it does open you up to a wider audience by becoming certified through somebody like the Motor Caravanners Club. If I pass you over to David now, he can probably give you a little bit more background in terms of the restrictions and the requirements for it, and the process that you need to go through. And then it might be worth just discussing a little bit again at the end of that, because I know some of the questions that have come up have been on potential costs and charging as well. So it might be worth just running through some information that we've got in terms of feedback from Camper and some other organisations in terms of price points and what people say they would be willing to pay for different services.
Thanks very much, Gemma. So just before we go to David, please keep your questions coming in. Use the Q&A tab, please, on the bottom. We've got some good questions already there, but pop them in as you think of them, and we'll get to them all before the end of the webinar. David, over to you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, good afternoon. I'll basically go through things. We operate under the Camping and Touring Caravans Exemption Certificates, which is issued by Natural England. The way of getting this, sorry, I'm a bit nervous of doing this. The sites occupied by supervised and exemption certificates require sites. We do certified sites or night stops. The certified stops is normally a 5-night site where you can stay more than 1 day, and a night stop is normally on the car park of a pub, which is probably a good idea anyway. For the requirements, really, a freshwater tap and rubbish bins, we would expect to have at least the minimum on a site. But hard standings, chemical disposal points, electric hookups, and dogs allowed exercise areas and disabled facilities. Now, these also will give you the rough idea what fee they can charge. The more you've got, obviously, the more you can charge, because people expect a lot. One of the things a lot of people now do expect is electric hookup, because a lot of the vans have a lot of usage for this. The cost of a certificate from the CL site from the Motor Caravan Club at the moment is £25. We don't charge for night stops. We issue a handbook, which is this every year, comes out every year. In it is all the CLs and night stops, plus friendly parking areas, which Gemma was on about earlier on. And then roughly about June, we bring a little booklet out, which then is up to dated or with all the latest CLs and it changes where fees are changed, etc. There are, we're going through a system with Camper at the moment for airs, which is the Continental version, which is slightly different from with us, because Gemma mentioned about distance between motorhomes. We like 6 meters between motorhomes. So if they put an awning out, which is normally about 3 meters, you still got a 3 meter fire gap between the two. The airs, there's different types of airs, which is an overnight parking only basically, or ones with service points where you probably could stay for longer. The process for certificate for the MCC is our website. If you go onto the Motor Caravanners website, you will find along the top banner, CL sites, night stops and airs. If you download those and then you fill the form out, post it please to the office, and then it will be dealt with through the office. We then go to planning, the local planning authority, to see if there's any objections, and if they come back and say no, there's not, then we issue a certificate. I think that's about all I can answer. There's a few questions probably coming up later, which I'll try and answer. That's okay.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much indeed, David. Lots of information there and a lot to take in. I think perhaps, shall we start with some of the questions and see how we can move forward? So as I say, to answer the questions, we've got David, which is great. We've got Gemma too. We've got Jill Haig, our MD. And if we can't answer the questions for you today, we will take those questions away and we'll come back to you if we need some specialist advice. So from the top, there was a question earlier about shepherd's huts and where they fit in. David, presumably they're not within your arrangements.
Well, a shepherd's hut, I mean, I don't know really what they're on about, because basically, are they going to use that as a sort of a place where they can still have 5 motorhomes and caravans on the site and then use that as an amenity block, or what?
I think the question relates to, are shepherd's huts outside the umbrella of certified sites within your definition?
I wouldn't like to say yay or nay on that one. I've never heard of that one before, but I'll check up on it for you.
Okay, so we'll take that one back. And we'll come back to that.
I think from a planning point of view, shepherd's huts fall under a different category, because this is very specifically about motorhomes, campervans and caravans in the legislation. And if I remember rightly, I think shepherd's huts fall outside of that, but I will double check and update on that one.
Okay, so thank you for that question. The next question on the tab was about asking for help in the Allerdale area for encouraging responses from their planning teams. Now, Gemma, we've been working closely, haven't we, with Allerdale and with Copeland and their planners. What's your view on that?
If you want to contact me separately afterwards, or I can grab your contact details, we can forward information through to Allerdale. I mean, they are very keen. We have been in discussions with their planners, and I think they are offering free consultation at the moment to try and encourage people in terms of setting up any facilities for camping or motorhomes and caravans. So from that point of view, I'm a little bit surprised that you're struggling, but if you can forward me, or if I get in contact afterwards and we push through some individual information and know a bit more about the individual case, then it's something we can highlight with them.
Great, thanks. And Jill's put Gemma's email address up there, so thanks very much for that. Question from Emily, who's a car park manager. I don't know which district you're a car park manager in, but the question is, we currently don't allow people to stay in the vehicles overnight on our car parks. Is the legislation, presumably referring to the Campervan certified site location legislation, appropriate for this sort of setting? Now, Jill, we've had discussions, have we not, in our CT board meetings about car parks? And I know that Mary Robinson from Eden has been interested in this particular area. Do you want to mention that one, Jill?
Yeah, I think Emily might be from Eden from memory as well. It's definitely something that that Eden have recognised is an issue, and often these restrictions that have been put in for overnight parking are to try and resolve a separate issue that's going on. So I know that Mary's been speaking to the chief executive at Eden to look at what the opportunities are to relax that. But it's not just Eden; it's other areas. Am I right in thinking, Gemma, that was it Barrow? Somewhere else was having a similar challenge?
Yes, Barrow Borough Council have looked at introducing a couple of sites, and I think some of it can sometimes be to do with the TPOs on the specific site. There are other areas that what they actually do is they just overlook the TPOs, and they just, although they technically aren't supposed to allow people to stay overnight, they just don't enforce that. I know Craven District Council are an example. They do this in a couple of their sites, and I think they're technically, the TPO says they can't have overnight parking, but they do allow it, and they have an overnight parking charge, and they do find that works quite well, and that is used, and people do tend to pay as well. So that does work very positively for them.
Right, okay, thank you for that. David, you want to come in there? Sorry. No.
Well, we do actually have in the handbook a list of friendly car parks. We do find that some car parks, like Gemma said, don't enforce it, but some do allow overnight parking on their car parks. It's local, up to the local authority whether they want that or not.
Great, thanks for that insight. That's good. Okay, next point here. I haven't got a name for this one, but the question is, can we clarify the difference between motorhomes, caravans and tents? Are they all treated the same way by the certification organisations? So again, that's one for you, David. What's the difference between motorhomes, caravans and tents in your certification?
Well, basically, we're the Motor Caravanners Club. So we just have motor caravans and camper vans in our club. The Camping and Caravan Club, they have all three, and I believe the Caravan and Motorhome Club do the same, but we only stay with motor caravans or camper vans.
Okay,
I think there are two separate exemption certificates, I do believe. So there's one there's one exemption certificate that you can get for motorhomes, camper vans and caravans, but you then have to get a separate exemption certificate for tents. But I think you can get both, can't you, at the same time? But
I would
they'd
have
have
thought
to
so
be.
from the other clubs, but I mean, with the Motor Caravan Club,
You only do
we only
the
allow pup tents
caravanning.
within the curtilage of the van, but no tents or trailer tents on our certificate.
And currently, with the government's extension of the 28-day rule to 56-day rule, that means that you can have campsites on your land for 56 days without planning approval, provided that you don't do any land developments. That's right, Gemma, I think, isn't it?
It is, but I don't think that applies to. Does that apply to motorhomes and campervans as well?
I don't think so. No.
No, it's just for tents.
My understanding was it was just for camping and car parking. Yeah.
Yes, and you are allowed to put in temporary toilets and things like that to enable that as well, I think, over the 56 days.
Exactly, provided there are temporary structures only. Yeah. As we're all finding out, this is a very complicated area, but we're finding our way through it. Right, question from Christine Knipe from Westmoreland County Show. How long does certification take for Motor Caravanners Club, please, to be achieved? So David, one for you, please. How long does it take to get through?
Well, normally we try and do it as quickly as possible, but our biggest problem at the moment is the fact we have to go through the local authorities planning department. And as you know, a lot of them are shut down or not working full time. And so we're having a delay on that. But normally we try and get to 3 to 4 weeks.
Great, thank you. And that leads brilliantly on to the next question, which is why does the Motorhome Club have to ask planning if none is required? But you're just simply consulting them, aren't you, on these occasions? There's no planning approval required, is that right?
No, there's no planning approval, but it's basically, I think it's something we've always done since we've been issuing certificates through Natural England. It's one of the things we've done. And it might not be necessary, but I think it's still a good idea to have it, so they can tell us what the local area is, and they can say whether yay or nay, that we depend on them in the final decision of whether a CL site or a night stop is issued.
And David, in your experience, would local planners not give approval for that to go ahead, and that would affect your decision then? And if that is the case, what sort of things would they cite as reasons for that certification not being given?
Not suitable, and the area is not suitable for it. We've had places turned down where the local authority do not want that site to be used for that. We've even had a church car park turned down lately because they don't want it to be used, because where it is, and probably a lot of it's to do with traffic coming in and out on that particular site. Probably they think it might be out of hours and annoying the neighbours, which is fair enough.
Sure, thank you. And that refers also to the next question, which is, can we clarify how the voice of the community is heard in the process of setting up a certificated site? So is that through the local authority planning liaison, or is the local community consulted in any different way?
Well, normally we go through the planning authority. We think that they would probably consult locally if necessary, but at the moment that's the only one we do look at, because each site is different.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, next question one. This is a really good one too. How can we specify the size of the camper van as part of the site? Due to access issues, we might not be able to accommodate larger vehicles, and we've all seen massive camper vans and motorhomes, have we not, on the roads recently? So David, can you put restrictions in terms of size?
Yes, we do. On the application form, it gives it the size of the road and the size of the access of the gate or what going in, and the owner of the CL can stipulate and say over a certain size of vehicle cannot be taken. And that
Good,
goes
answer
in.
that question well. Excellent, thank you. Right then, so the next one is it acceptable to be certified with multiple organisations, so either more than just yourselves? Is that beneficial? Is there any point in doing that?
Normally we expect in that site, no, because if you have, say, a site from us and a site from the caravan and camping club, they should be separate.
Great.
If you've got a big field, then okay, you might put one side in for one side and another side in for but that's the only way you can do it. You can't have a mixture on the same site, because there's only 5 vans can get there anyway.
Yeah. Gemma, do you want to come in there?
I think if you were looking to have camper vans, motorhomes, caravans and tents, you'd probably have to go through somebody like the Caravan and Camping Club who certifies for both, would be the sensible option.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question then from David Garnett. So if we're planning to use our site as a more permanent site throughout the year, can we use the relevant clubs to sort out the planning? David, do you want to comment on that one?
Sorry, I missed the end of it.
No, it's fine. So he's asking if they want to use the site as a more permanent site throughout the year and not just for short-term use, could they use multiple clubs to sort out the planning? And this is an interesting question that crops up quite a lot, doesn't it, in terms of local residents, in terms of is this a way in for a permanent site?
Well, we have got sites which are open all year round.
Right, so there's no restriction from that point of view.
So I mean, yeah, I mean the site owner stipulates basically what time he wants to be open. If he wants to be open all year, then it's an all year site.
And in your experience, would the local authority put a restriction on the time scale it's open for if they wished or not?
Well, since I've been doing it, I haven't seen anything put on like that.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, and then another question here on the space between vans, which we've just touched on already. And the question is the space requirement between vans only, i.e., is there a different minimum space between a parked van and a building or a fence? So yeah, this is a fire restriction, isn't it? That's really important, certainly on our site with planning approval. And you mentioned, David, it's really important for temporary structures too, like motorhomes and campers. So is the distance between the vans, or is the distance between the nearest van and between the nearest building and the van?
Well, I would thought the distance between the 2 vans we 6 meters, and I would have thought that at least 3 meters at the minimum between a building and a motorhome.
Yeah, good, thank you. Right, next question from Harold Windle. Will CI developers be encouraged to access to sanitation facilities for a fee? So is that question saying that, no, perhaps it means CL. So will CL developers be encouraged to access sanitation facilities? So in the case of CLs then, or certified sites, David, what is the score generally with disposal of black waste and other such things? And you mentioned a bit about litter already and waste disposal. What about foul sewage waste and things?
Well, we at the moment, some sites have a chemical disposable point, but the thing we're meeting at the moment is a lot of places that are normally out in the wilds, they've got septic tanks, and normally we don't recommend that they use anything else in those tanks, because you don't know what they're doing to the tank with it. But there is a green waste or a green chemical which we do use in the motorhomes, which is normally safe for septic tanks. But we've just had another problem come up similar to that, where a site has got a septic tank and the local authority are not too happy about it, using it as a chemical waste point for that.
Yeah, I'm aware of some situations where registered caravan parks, the bigger ones, have actually closed down sewage plants by using that for sewage disposal. So yeah, it's a real issue in there. So Gemma, we're aware, aren't we, of some companies that are offering a service to provide tanks for foul waste. Is that right?
We are, yes. I think David is actually in the meeting. So there are a couple. There are quite a few suppliers across the county. There is a local supplier called Northern Lewes, I do believe it is now called, who do offer mobile waste disposal units. So these are a range of prices dependent on the size of a unit and where it's located and how often it's going to need emptying. But they're, happy to discuss options and talk about possibilities with people. We are encouraging, to become a certified site, you don't have to have waste disposal facilities, but we are encouraging people ideally to do so if they can. And again, it's the price that generally gets charged for the site overnight reflects the amount of facilities on site. So having this as an additional facility could work quite well if you're looking at trying to charge a little bit more for people. So yeah, there are other alternatives, there are other options. I have got some information I can circulate as well at the end of the meeting in terms of different options for people to install for black waste disposal. So yes, there are mobile temporary options, and there are also some other alternatives as well to have a look at. But as David said, it can be a little bit difficult if you are straight into a septic tank system, because the chemicals used in a lot of the cassettes can damage septic tanks. So.
Okay, so just a quick question to Dave. Sorry, David, you want to come in there? Sorry. No. Okay, a quick question to David then. So, in your experience, do CL sites have arrangements with larger established caravan parks for disposal of foul waste at a fee, or does that not happen?
Not that I know of.
Ah, interesting.
I'm
okay.
sorry, it's one of those things I've never. There's a questions coming up that I've not been asked before, but not that I know of. That, but I know the. I'm pretty sure that the other two clubs do allow people to go in and empty their black waste, as you call it, as it's called, and for a fee. But that's all I do know, that certain clubs do, or the two clubs I'm sure have some sites where you're allowed to go in and sort of empty your grey waste as well as your black waste, and then top up with water and things like that for a fee.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks for that. So David Garnett's added to his last question, I think, and he's illustrated the point by talking about Dudden Sports Club, where they've had caravan club meetings. They've already had them, and they're or as a private booking, but they're looking at becoming more of an official site. Now, caravan club sort of rallies are different, Gemma, aren't they? With different different approvals. Do you want to just talk a bit about that?
I do believe that you can be a site for a rally, and it's a slightly different set of legislation, whereas this site, you could, I think David might correct me, but I do believe you can become a site for a specific rally and a specific club meet is separate to being a certified site location. So I do believe that you could also become a certified site location, which would allow you to have up to 5 vehicles all year round. Although there is a restriction on 28 days for maximum stay of any one vehicle as well. But yeah, you should be allowed to do both of those, I do believe, because as far as I'm aware, it's a different legislation that I think sits with the caravan club and is under their license to be able to host a meet on your site.
Right, thanks for clarifying that. That's that question.
Yeah, we do issue, excuse me, rally. We do hold rallies on sites like that, and we have a certificate which we allowed is used exemptly for that specific reason.
Great, thank you. Right, brilliant questions coming through. Thanks a lot. Please keep them coming. We're going to keep going to the end of the questions. And if you're losing the will a bit here, please don't. You know, there's a real opportunity here to provide facilities for our visitors. And I know from personal experience, a lot of people that do this really enjoy it, and they really enjoy hosting small groups of motorhomes. So keep with us. I'm sure we can make it happen for you. Next question then is a quick one for David, really. How many toilets / showers would you recommend for a CL site of 5 motorhomes? Roughly, have you got a view on that at all?
Well, I mean, 1 shower and 1 toilet, I would have thought, because the maximum of 10 people going to be there if you at any one time, usually, and there's probably 2 in each motorhome. And they come, and don't forget, motorhomes have got their own toilets as well, and showers, most of them.
Yeah, good point. Right, thank you for that. Next question. Do you need planning permission to put hookups, toilet and waste disposal hard standing on a certified site? So do you need planning permission to put hookups, toilet and waste disposal hard standing on a certified site? I think we need to deal with that bit by bit, because it's a really good and quite complicated question, isn't it? My understanding is for any sort of groundworks, you need planning approval for that, David. Is that your understanding too?
I would have thought so.
Yeah, so, but if it's a temporary toilet facility like a portaloo or a portable shower, they don't need planning approval. Is that right?
I would have thought so.
Yeah, and waste disposal.
Sorry, all the planning rules, they tend to differ in different parts of of the UK. But I wouldn't like to say yay or nay on that.
Right. The rules seem quite straightforward on the 56-day agreement, in so much as any sort of groundworks that affect the land or any sort of buildings or any structures would need planning approval. So that's fairly black and white, I think, really. Gemma, you know about this too. Have you got anything you would like to add on that one?
I think David's right. I think it would depend slightly on what areas you're in, again, because a lot of this falls under permitted development, I think. So for some areas, they might not have permitted development or full permit development rights for various reasons. So I'd probably just recommend to always check with your local planning officer. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, anything that would be more permanent on works would require planning usually. But anything temporary, so such as temporary shower blocks, temporary toilet blocks, or a temporary waste disposal, I don't think would need planning permission as a general rule, but again, you probably need to double check.
Right, thank you for that. Right, somebody asked the question, they missed the first 20 minutes. Will the minutes of this meeting, as in minutes of the meeting, not minutes as in time, be available after this webinar is finished? And we can do even better than that, because we can make this recording available to you thanks to the brilliant work of Johnny behind the scenes putting all this together. So we can give you that link to that. It's probably going to be on YouTube if you want to catch up with this, because it is very detailed and there's lots of information coming out. So that's that one. Right, next question from Justin Farnham. So he's talking about the question on overnights in car parks. If you're running a pop-up car park, that's under the 28 now 56-day rule, rather than a permanent one, which would need full planning permission. So it's temporary car park on 56-day rule. Can you also allow up to 5 camper vans overnight too on those 56 days? Or is it two completely separate processes, i.e. it's either or not both? That's a really complicated question, Justin. Right, who's gonna have a stab at that one? Gemma, you don't have a go at that.
I would probably say it's too, well, the 56-day rule only allows for camping. So you would then also have to become certified. So I think technically if you became a certified site location, you would still be allowed the 5 camper vans, but I'm not 100% sure about the rules on the pop-up car park. So I'm not sure whether that would preclude you or not with it being a pop-up car park. Although technically the certified site is based purely on land, isn't it, rather than whether it's a car park or not, I do believe.
I think it's one to take away.
Yeah, I think that is one to take away.
Anybody else want to answer that one, David or Jill? Very wise. I think my understanding of the 56-day rule is if you want a 56-day rule to extend your existing fully fledged caravan park for camping, you can do 56-day rules on different pieces of land. So it may be possible to do, as Gemma says, do camping alongside car parking if it's a discrete piece of land. But I think that does need clarification rather than trusting our views on that.
Yes.
Right, thank you, Justin. Trust the next, current CT board member to ask the most difficult question so far. Much appreciated. I know you want to put us on our test, so that's good. Right, moving on. So this is, I don't know who this is, but we have a large rugby ground currently informally allowing caravans, camper vans and tents. We did have certification through the Caravanning and Camping Club, but not covered currently. What is the way forward for us? We don't want to make our site exclusive to camper vans. Gemma, is that a matter of re-energizing that application with the Caravanning and Camping Club, you think?
Yeah, I would imagine so, because the Motor Caravanners Club only issue the caravan and camper van stroke motorhome certificates. So I think there probably are, there may be other organisations out there, but I think the Caravan Camping Club are the leading one that issue both certificates as far as I'm aware.
Okay, David, anything to add there?
Well, we've got several rugby clubs in our CL sites on our list.
Right, great, okay, good, thank you. Right, the next point is from Helen Aitken from ACT, I think. Can you clarify, this is one for David, can you clarify the difference between CL stops, night stops and airs? It's essential to have an outside, is it essential to have an outside tap and rubbish bins for all of these? Also, as I understand it, use of awnings was considered camping behaviour and not permitted, or is that only for airs? Is the 2 metre distance between vehicles a requirement? But that is the greater distance you mentioned is what the motor caravanners recommend. It's a recommendation rather than requirement then on distance. This will have a significant impact on the number of vehicles smaller sites can accommodate. Yeah, some detailed questions there. Do you want to have a go at that, David, for us, please?
Well, we're coming back now. The distance recommended is 6 metres between vans to start off with. I'm sorry, it got a bit complicated, that question. What was the other parts they were after?
That question just disappeared.
Can you clarify the difference between CL stops, night stops and airs was the first?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
let's take that first then, yeah.
Right, a CL stop is normally a site for 5 motorhomes, and it would normally, people can stay there for more than up to 28 days on that if they wish to. A night stop is, as it says, it's a night stop. It's normally a stop, normally in a pub car park or somewhere like that, where you could stay normally for the night or 2 nights and use the local facilities. And an air is slightly different. It's like normally in a car park where you provide black waste, water tap, chemicals, possibly chemical disposal, and that on the site, plus other things which would normally be on a car park. And I think there's a slight difference between distances, because if you're staying there on some sites, some CLs are just basic CLs with that, and other ones, and they got service points. So there's 2 types of CL which Camper have defined for me, because they know more about it than I do.
Great, thank you. So the next part of the question was, is it essential to have an outside tap and rubbish bins for all of these? But your recommendation is they're fundamental facilities which should be there. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. At least a water tap and rubbish bins would be the minimum.
Right, and then the next part of the question is about awnings, and it says that in the case of airs, awnings are interpreted as being camping and therefore not permitted.
Correct.
But that's not an issue for certificated sites. No, because you allow them, right?
CL sites normally, but night stops you probably wouldn't put an awning out anyway.
Yeah, right. And then the next bit is about the distance which we've dealt with, which is your 6 meters. There's a question about 2 meters, and I think your advice is 6 meters, but there's not a specific requirement. Is that right?
Not specific, but it's basically, I think it's a safety thing. I think they've probably worked out the system that if it's 6 meters between 2 vans, the likelihood if one van getting on fire, which is we hope is never going to happen, it would not less affect the other van. If they're too close together, then you've got one van on fire, then affecting the other vans.
Yeah, and if you've been involved with caravan parks yourself, you've probably seen videos of caravan or motorhome fires, and they are really frightening. So that's why that is so fundamentally important. And if you've got a site with planning approval, you'll know that there are stringent fire precautions and fire facilities you have to deal with through the fire service, which are really quite onerous but important, and goes through the building, the local planning, building control elements of planning, I think. Right, okay, that was a complicated one. Jill, did you want to come in now?
No, I'm listening keenly.
You're fine. Yeah, right, you just popped up. Fine. Right, next one is M. Walker again, who was asking the question before about consultation with planners. Do you need approval from planning, and why do CLs need that consultation to take place? So the question is, still don't understand, if planning approval isn't needed, how can the local authority stop an overnight site being used? So I think, David, it's your organisation's custom and practice to consult with planners just to make sure that there are no issues in terms of local residents or local conditions which would make it not appropriate to have a site in that location. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and does that happen with the camping and caravanning club, do you know?
I don't know. I would have thought they would, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it's an advisory thing. I think it is
sorry, I think it is part of the recommended process as part of the Natural England legislation that the local planning authorities consulted. So it's not the same as going through the full planning process with sort of a 8 weeks lapse for people to be able to object and things. It is it's literally a consultation with the local planners to say, we've had this application, do you see any strong reasonable reason why this shouldn't go ahead? And I think they can only really object on very sort of valid grounds, can't they?
My understanding is there's a disposition to approve, not to stop it going ahead, and that's where they're coming from. Good, right, okay. Next question from Seb Hindley. Can anyone stay on a motor caravan certified site? Do the guests have to be members of the MCC? And if so, how quick can they join? And what is the cost of such membership? They are, David, good membership opportunity there for you to promote.
We welcome all members to join. I think at the moment, I'm not 100% sure. I say about £35 to join. The other part of the question was, sorry,
was how quick can they join? Yeah.
It's normally apply to the Motor Caravanners Club for joining. If you go once again onto the Motor Caravanners Club site, along the top of the banner, there is a joining form and everything.
Great. And can you stay on your sites if you're not a member?
Yes, we don't. You don't have to be a member of the Motor Caravanners Club to stay on one of our CLs or night stops.
Great, thank you very much for that. And another question from Christine. Do you know if the Caravan and Camping Club also certify campervans? That's my understanding, Gemma, is that right?
Yes, they do.
They do.
Fine.
I think it's members only on those.
Right,
thank you. Yeah, it's members only for their sites though.
Next question then, is there a register of public sites for disposal of foul waste? And that's something, Gemma, we've been looking at, isn't it?
It is, yes. We are looking at talking to a lot of existing campsites and other opportunities for disposal of foul waste. It is a very difficult one at the moment, given COVID restrictions. Because historically where some local larger campsites would offer waste disposal at a set fee, they now can't necessarily allow additional people on site because there's a process that has to be followed once those tanks have been emptied in terms of cleaning maintenance and things like that. We are currently trying to pull together a list of places that do offer waste disposal within Cumbria, but it is a work in progress at the moment. I think there are some apps out there within the motorhome and campervanning community that do list places where you can dispose of waste. So it might be worth kind of seeking out a couple of those and sort of recommending those as well. But yes, we are in the process of trying to pull together a list. But it is a difficult one at the moment because there's a lot less sites than there would have been because of issues with COVID and things like that.
Thank you. Next question, for the exemption for 5 motorhomes, what's the period of time we are able to open for this year? So I think, David, you say it's unlimited, is that right?
Yeah, you can open all year if you wish to, yeah.
Fine. Justin's come back and said he's only asking questions for a potential practical application. Thank you, Justin. I'm sure you weren't just testing us, really. Next question, Carol Watson. Does the club have a privileged membership scheme for motorhome rental businesses like the Caravan and Camping Club do? So this is where if you've got a group of motorhomes that you rent out, presumably, yeah, you can offer the facilities of your organisation, David, to them.
No, we've got nothing like that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And the last question on this list here at the moment is, how close is too close for sites to be near to residents to create a cause for concern with noise, etc.? So yeah, that's the good neighbour principle. What's your experience there, David, in terms of being close to residential areas?
Well, at the moment, to my knowledge, we've only had 2 turned down for that reason.
Right, thank you. Okay. Right, one more question. Yeah. Somebody said to manage waste, we're on top of this. Good, that's very positive, excellent.
I think it's, are we on top of this? Sorry.
Oh, are we on top of this? Sorry, I'm making a statement rather than a question, sorry. Managing waste. Well, it is a problem, isn't it, as Gemma has illustrated. We thought originally the working group that we set up would be able to identify existing sites who have already invested heavily in waste disposal systems for foul waste who would allow people not staying there to dispose of their foul waste at that site in that facility for a fee, which might be significant, like £25, which only would need to be done every 3 or 4 days. But interestingly, we have had a bit of a knockback there, Gemma, haven't we? For the reasons Gemma's already illustrated, where many existing larger parks, official parks, do not want to have more people coming onto site than absolutely necessary because of the risks of transmission of the virus, and also disposing of waste in a limited space, which could cause issues in terms of personal contact. So it is a difficult one, that, but as Gemma said, we're working on that and we're trying to find solutions to that.
I think we are currently looking at trying to encourage, I mean, there is a pattern of behaviour between quite a lot of current motorhome owners anyway, and something we'd look to encourage between new motorhome owners is using a mixture of official sites and more informal sites as well. So I think if you look at our survey, I think there was something like 30% of people were doing that when they visited, because the toilets only need emptying every sort of 2 to 3 days, 3 to 4 days, depending on the size of the cassette. Then what a lot of people do is they tend to use it a mixture of both, and then when they're on the formal sites, that's when they take the opportunity to top up water and get rid of the waste. But we will have sort of guidance on waste disposal and links on the website to responsible waste disposal and guidance on that as well. And at the moment, that's the behaviour that we're encouraging. The one downside or barrier we found with that is that some of the larger sites don't always offer one night availability or short sort of minimum stay availability, which makes it slightly more difficult for people to do this. But after speaking with a lot of the larger sites, they do tend to offer shorter notice availability, but they only tend to release that availability nearer the time of people's stay. So I think there will be a bit of an educational process in terms of pushing that information out to people and encourage them to book ahead where possible, especially for those more formal sites. But if they are looking at wanting to stay for just one night, or the odd night or the odd 2 nights here and there, that they may need to book less in shorter notice and less in advance to be able to do so.
Well, we are aware, aren't we? This is a serious problem because we've heard in Scotland, for example, people disposing of waste in streams and causing major damage to ecosystems, which is obviously completely out of order. So we are on with that at the moment, as Gemma said, and hopefully going to come up with some ideas. Right, the last call for questions now. If you have anything else you'd like to ask, please pop your questions in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I think we're about there. We had 29 questions in total, which is brilliant. It's a lot more challenging than managing a Cumbria Tourism board meeting with the questions at the end of it. So I've enjoyed that. Most importantly, though, I really hope that we've managed to unpack some of the detail around this. It's one of these things that the more you get into it, the more complicated it really is. And I think, Gemma, you've got your hand up. Did you want to say?
Sorry, I just wanted to answer one of the questions that we got in the when people were submitting their applications to the webinar, when people were signing up. I think we got a few questions regarding price points and what sort of prices people would be willing to pay. Camper's information, which is I think based more on the air system in France, say that for parking only they'd be looking at around £5. For parking with waste disposal, they'd be looking at paying about £3. So this is obvious on the continent, and for camping, water and waste, the price is normally around £10. But obviously, I'd probably do a bit of a sort of you've got to factor in your own potential running costs for that as well. If you are offering waste, you've got to factor in the cost of you offering that waste disposal. There is potentially the opportunity, if you do go for mobile waste disposal on your site, if there I don't know how you'd manage it, but you may be able to charge for other vehicles who are not staying on the site to actually come and use your waste disposal facilities for a charge, but you'd have to find a way of managing that and charging people for it. So yeah, I think the amount people expect to pay depends very much on the facilities that have been made available, really. So if you are offering not just parking, but also potential shower facilities, water facilities, and waste disposal, then you can obviously charge more than somebody who's just offering basic overnight parking with a water source.
Okay, thank you. Were there any further questions on that list? I think we've covered most of them, I think, haven't we now? Gemma? Yeah.
Can I just add something which I missed out
Please.
when I first started? It's basically, if someone joins us as a CL site, they will normally get the handbook, which I showed you earlier on, and a half-yearly booklet, which in June, with an updated list of night stops and airs. The airs at the moment, we're waiting for Natural England to agree to us doing that. But they get a monthly magazine, signage and advertising on the club's website. This also covers postage administration and support from the club office. Night stops are also advertised in the Practical Motorhome magazine.
Great. Okay, thank you. Right, no more questions have come through. I think we dealt with the ones we knew in advance and the current ones. So altogether, we've answered lots of questions. So I hope that's been useful. David, huge thanks to you for your help today. You've joined us from North Devon, a long way away, but it's been really, really useful, and we really value your expertise and your experience. So huge thanks for that. We wish you a successful season and hope that things go smoothly, as they will hopefully go for us too. And thanks, Gemma, too. Gemma's been working really hard on this for CT and for our members. So thank you very much too for that information and that expertise that you've injected today. And if there's nothing else to raise, I think we call a halt there and say thanks very much. But this is not the end of the relationship. If we can help you further, you've got Gemma's email address, and we will continue to keep in touch with you if you wish, if you can let us know contact details. I think we may have those already through the webinar process. And we appreciate it's going to be not easy, but the goal is well worth it. And you will be helping not only business, some income for yourself and for your operation, but also you'll be helping the destination cope with what we think will be quite a challenging time going ahead. So thanks in advance for that. Successful season to you, and thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.